Talk about viruses, and so we're going to talk about this in connection with characteristics of living things, which we've already talked about earlier in the year. We kind of previewed that in Unit 0, the intro unit, and now we are going to explain how viruses are not living things, and then we're going to talk about two of the cycles that viruses, or two different types of viruses that there are, two different cycles, and then we'll talk about the vaccines and what vaccines are. So are viruses living? Remember, all living things have to have these requirements, and viruses do not meet many of them. And some of them are questionable. A couple of them they definitely have. So, example, viruses do have DNA, and they do adapt and evolve as a class of viruses. They're not organisms, but they do evolve and adapt. They are not made of cells. They do have DNA, like I said, but they're not considered cells. They use energy, but they do not have the same metabolic cycles that we have. So what they're doing requires energy, but it's not the same as what we would say living things have. They can reproduce, more so they replicate. They can replicate their DNA or get to a point where they make another organism replicate their DNA. They cannot reproduce on their own. So they have to hijack another organism's reproductive cycles and get them to reproduce them. So do they reproduce? Yes, but not really. And they don't respond to stimuli in the same way that living organisms that we say do, and they don't grow and develop. There's no development to them. So for those reasons, which are plenty, they are not considered living things. But we do talk about them as if they're living things. We say that we can, kill a virus, or we can fight it like it's a living thing, but it is not technically a living thing because it doesn't have many of the characteristics of life that are required for living things. So let's talk about these two cycles. We've got the lytic cycle and the lysogenic cycle. So if a virus is going through this cycle, what they're doing is they're invading a cell, hijacking that cell, and making that cell reproduce themselves. And so let's look at it. So the first step is attachment. So the virus, which looks kind of like this, I drew a little bit larger up here. The virus attaches to a cell. Let's say this is a bacteria cell. It doesn't have a nucleus, but it's attaching to the cell. And then it makes entry. So the DNA enters the cell. The virus hijacks that cell's reproductive, or some of the processes that are going on in that cell, and it replicates the virus over and over and over and over and over and over. And I can only draw 5 of them in here. You can draw as many as you want in your notes, but whatever you draw is probably not going to be realistic because there's just a huge amount that it's replicating very quickly. And then eventually, this weird shape is supposed to be the cell after it ruptures. So the cell then opens up. The cell dies, opens up, and these individual viruses spread out, and they start this cycle again and again and again and again. So one cell can turn into massive amounts of, or can make massive amounts of viruses that then goes out to others, which goes to others, which goes to others. It's a very quick. This cycle is called the lytic cycle. An example of organisms that go through, or viruses that go through this, are the flu virus and the norovirus, two that you may be familiar with. All right, let's talk about the lysogenic cycle. The lysogenic cycle is you're going to see some similarities with the lytic cycle, except for, in my opinion, a really cool difference. So you see attachment and entry. You see the virus attach. The DNA from the virus goes into the bacteria cell, but instead of hijacking all the things and making it copy immediately, what happens is it integrates with the DNA. So with the DNA of the bacteria cell. So it combines with and kind of fuses together with the DNA of the cell, and it just stays there. It doesn't do anything. There's no drastic symptoms, no real damage that's going on yet. The virus is just taking over the cell, or adding its DNA to the cell and letting it go through its normal processes. So the cell reproduces. There's binary fission that goes through this asexual reproduction, that it continues to reproduce. And I just drew 2 layers of that. This is not meiosis. This is mitosis twice, or 2 different stages, 2 different generations of it. replication happens, and then somewhere down the line it gets activated, and then it switches to the lytic cycle, and which ends in all the cells. These again is a poor attempt at drawing a cell being ruptured open, but the black parts of the cells being ruptured, and then the virus are coming out. I drew 2 or 3 in each one, but again, the numbers are going to be very huge, a lot of viruses coming out, and then they can continue doing that process. So we have the lytic cycle, which is hijacking, it's getting into the cell, messing with the DNA and the processes there. The virus makes copies of itself, or makes the cell make copies of it, and then it ruptures. The lysogenic cycle is the same, similar end result, except that it can stay dormant in that organism. The actual organism, it can stay dormant for a long time. Examples of this would be herpes simplex, HIV, and I believe warts are also an example. So you could have this virus in your cells, and your cells would continue having that virus DNA in it, but you would not see symptoms. So sometimes this can look like having the virus and not showing symptoms for a while, or showing symptoms and then going through like a late dormant period where the DNA is not doing much, and then it popping up and then doing damage again. So for both of these, once the virus is done through the process, it starts over. I just wrote rinse and repeat. Again, starts over. Let's talk about vaccines. Vaccines, I just wrote this definition down, biological preparation to provide immunity against specific viruses. And so this is a preparation that's going on. So I gave the example in class of if you're going to fight against somebody and you were going head on head and it was fair, there's a chance that the other person could beat you and do some damage to you. But if you were to handcuff the person and they were blindfolded or something, it would be really easy to learn where to hit them, how they fight, some of the things of what they do. You'll learn enough about them so that when later on the virus without the handcuffs or without the blindfold or whatever comes in, then you're ready and you already know, you're already prepared to fight that specific virus. And so a vaccine is something similar. A vaccine, you use dead or weak forms of the virus. And what you actually do is you put that virus inside of your body, the dead form or the weak form, and you put it inside your body. And your body goes through its normal immune system responses, but there's not much. It's not the same because you're not fighting an active enemy that's going full throttle. You're fighting a weak or a dead version of the enemy. So your immune system is able to figure out how to fight the virus, and then for the rest of your life, let's just say for the rest of your life, you are now ready to fight that virus if it ever pops up. Or if a slightly mutated version of that virus pops up, then you're somewhat prepared. You're not going into it cold. You've already prepared a little bit for that kind of virus. And so that's what happens. We've talked about that with the flu. You can get different. When you get a virus for something, you are becoming immune to that specific type. And if it mutates, you can be helped towards being immune, not immune, but being able to quickly fight that version as well. So without going into much more detail, that's essentially it. And a vaccine prepares your body to fight an enemy that you, as a person giving yourself the vaccine or getting the vaccine, you think has a high chance of hurting you. So immunity can be biological you can get that from your parents, but vaccines are kind of a cheat code that we've found out in modern history of how to give a weak or dead form of the virus so that your body can appropriately prepare for the real thing and it doesn't hurt you nearly as bad or at all.